Okay, hello and welcome to our webinar about Advanced Application Lifecycle Management for Power Platform. My name is Robert, and today I would like to show you our solution, the KDTooling Deployment Manager. Very strong solution for 𝗖𝗂 concepts for Power Platform and Dynamics. So basically, you can create automated deployments within a few minutes and then just add new features step by step. So just press one button and, for example, enable the deployment of portals. We're very focused on enterprises, so our solution does support a lot of advanced features like compliance restrictions and so on. So you usually don't have to modify the production system directly. So this is one of our main goals. And today we have a very mixed audience. So we have a lot of technical people and also developers and project managers. So I would like to give you a quick introduction and an overview, and we have, of course, a lot of time at the end of the session, so we will have between 30 and 40 minutes of content, and then we have enough time for Q&A. So your questions, of course, are very welcome. So let's start with a quick look on the topics for today. I would like to start with a quick introduction about our company, what we do, so you have a little bit more information about us. And, of course, the webinar goals. So basically, okay, what should be the main content of the whole session? So is the tool a very helpful tool for you, or can it solve some issues, deployment issues? So I would like to explain the main features here. And also I would like to show you a full 𝗖𝗂 concept in 2 minutes. Of course, it will take a little bit more time because I will explain every single step and every single slide, but in reality it can take just up to 2 minutes. Of course, you need the credentials and so on, but it can be done very quick. And I would like to show you the steps for that. And also a few daily business cases. So for example, if you need to change from an option set to an entity reference and things like that. So a lot of very common challenges, but also technical things. And I would like to talk about teams and source control. So usually you have multiple teams, developers, release managers, and so on. And I think a very important fact is that everybody of the team should be able to deploy. So I've seen this many times that people have very distributed knowledge. So basically there's just one guy who's responsible for the release management, and the others have a very strong dependencies that one specific resource. So I would like to explain how we do that. And also configuration and compliance. I think configuration is a very important part of deployments, because usually if you just have the solutions, you export them, you import them, okay, that's it. But then you have to do a lot of manual steps. And I would like to show you the features for this as well, and also a few things about compliance. And also a live demo. So basically when I execute step 3, the full 𝗖𝗂 concept in 2 minutes, I would like to show you live how it works. Basically, I will start it. Of course, we cannot wait for the full thing. That will take too much time. But yeah, I think you will understand the idea here. And as I already said, yeah, we have some Q&A. Okay, a few words about us. As you know, I'm Robert. I'm one of the software architects here, and the company is very focused on Microsoft technologies, especially on Dynamics. So what we offer is, of course, a deployment solution, but also consulting services for deployment concepts. So we usually don't develop things that just have full projects. We just have part of it. So basically, our consulting services can be used to execute and implement the deployment concept. So we basically just support other consulting partners. Okay, our session focus for today, enterprise 𝗖𝗂 implementation with the KDTooling Deployment Manager. And well, I had so many discussions with other people, developers and architects and so on, and more or less every time the same thing. Yeah, of course the projects are different, but there are a lot of points in common. For example, the difference to the basic SDK. And honestly, of course, you can write a lot of scripts, so you can use the out-of-the-box functionality and script the rest on itself. So you can write some extensions. Yeah, you can use PowerShell for that, or 𝗖𝗂 or whatever. Yeah, or you can use multiple tools. And yes, it's a very valid way, so that's fair enough. But if you need out-of-the-box functionality, you just have a new project and you would like to start from scratch with 𝗖𝗂 from the very first day, it's easier if you just use one tool. So basically you just start one client and say, okay, this is my system, and just basic deployment, that's it. So I'm going to show you that on the next slides. So this is the main difference between the basic SDK and our solution. We try to provide all of the functionality out of the box without any custom scripting. And also very important point, setup time. So I told you, okay, we can do that in 2 minutes, and I think you will understand that when I show the next slides. So it should be possible to have the full setup within a few moments, yeah. So you can start CI/CD from the very first day of the project. Because if you start to implement it after the first go live or whatever, it takes some time to fix some things from the past. So I think you can understand what I mean with that. And also governance and cooperation. So basically, if you have multiple members, a new team member joins the team, then you need to explain, how the deployment works. So basically, we try to find a unified way to do that. So if you have the same thing for every deployment, you don't need to write any special instructions or things like that. And of course, execution and performance. So there are some limitations by the platform. So for example, the import time, you cannot modify it directly, but of course you can try to simplify the whole management around it. So if you have multiple solutions and so on, but I will explain the details on the next slides. And error analysis. So a lot of people invest much time to do error analysis. And again, of course, you can do that manually, but sometimes it's just simpler. For example, if you have just a component ID or things like that, and you need to go to the system and look for it. What we do is we pass error messages and give you a straight forward error message, and it's very easy to understand. So you don't need to convert any IDs or any other numbers to useful information. So we do that for you in the background. Okay, so this is our focus, and this is what I'm going to show you on the next slides. But before we start with the CI/CD implementation, I would like to mention a few common challenges. So of course, in most cases, you have multiple environments. So you have things like dev, cast, integration, UAT, pre-prod, and so on. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many environments you have. If you have more than 2 or 5, it doesn't matter. So I think this is a very common thing. Sometimes approvals, this is quite easy. If you're using Azure DevOps, you can use the out-of-the-box functionality. So this is not part of our thing. This is just a common challenge here. And as I already said, failed deployment analysis. And also documentation. So I know this is not a very developer-friendly topic, but you need it in most cases. The customer requires it. So they say, okay, we need some kind of documentation for whatever reason, so you need to do that manually. And this is the reason why we say, okay, let's do it in automatic way. So basically just have to press one button, maybe some approvals, and that's it. So you don't have to write anything down regarding configuration changes or post-deployment activities. And execution time, we will talk about that later as well. Post-deployment activities, so this is more or less the same, like documentation and adjust things. A very interesting point here is service endpoints. So you usually have to change the credentials, and this is also a manual step. And how-to knowledge. So as I already said, it's a very bad practice if you just have one guy who's responsible for the deployment, and you need to talk to him to execute the deployment. So this is another common challenge. So in total, what people usually do is, and of course there are exceptions, but this is just a general case here, what we have. So we usually have a deployment guide, so basically a document, and we need to upgrade the document from time to time into some maintenance stuff. And also we have a customer setup. So for example, as a consulting company, you have multiple customers, and in many cases they have some kind of toolings or some scripts in combination with some community applications, but they need to adjust or customize the setup for every new project. And for example, if you need 2 days to customize the setup because you have some special requirements from the customer side, you need to go through prep proxies and things like that. So usually you have to customize the scripts. And multiple tools. I mentioned that internal custom scripts. So actually it works, of course, but somebody has to do the maintenance work. So if you have your special team for that, they are 100% focused on that. That's fair enough, okay, but you still need to modify it. And trial and error approach, that's a very interesting thing, because if you go to the customer, you got a new feature in Dynamics, and they say, hey, we would like to use that new feature. Can it be deployed in the automatic way? And of course, you will say, yes, we can do that, but usually you just try it, and then you realize, okay, we need some special behavior in our deployment scripts, whatever, and then you start to modify it. So this is another thing. And also at the end of the day, you usually have some post-deployment tasks, because either you modify the scripts or you do the deployments manually in any way, or part of it actually. So so this is a very common situation. And again, I know there are some people who can do that job 100%, that's fair enough, then they don't need us. But what we do is we provide a solution where you can just use all of those things out of the box. So this is what we want. We would like to have a unified ALM solution. So if, as a big company with many people, with many projects, you would like to have one way to do deployments, and everyone can do that. So you don't have to explain everybody how it works. There's just one way and that's it. Doesn't matter which project. And of course, infrastructure shouldn't be a problem. So if you're in a bank or insurance company with a very restricted access rules, you need to support that as well. And of course, a one-stop solution, so we don't have to switch between multiple applications. And as I already said, we would like to enable features per click. So for example, if we use marketing, new feature in the product, okay, just enable it, say, I would like to use it like this, or just adjust the behavior with one click, just maybe modify some drop boxes, things like that, and then you can use it. So you don't need to script anything. No code solution, yeah. There are a few exceptions when you have a very special behavior, but in most cases you don't need it. And yeah, as I said, any team member should be able to deploy. So even non-technical persons like project managers and so on should be able to go to the system and just start the execution, yeah. That could be a bad practice because you need to know what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah. So if you deploy something, of course, you should know, okay, when I deploy that, it's going to change this and that functionality. So at the end of the day, somebody should be responsible. But from a technical point of view, everybody should be able to start it. And yeah, also an interesting thing, hot fixes and full deployments. So this is usually a very common requirement. What you need for that is basically a concept and a technical tool set for that. So the concept is more or less, okay, you have multiple solutions and then you have some hotfix solutions. So there are different ways to do that, but in any case, you need some tooling for that. And we support a very wide range of different concepts here. So you don't have to worry about the hotfix issues. Okay, so let's start with a quick walkthrough here. So I would like to show you how we can implement from scratch a full CI/CD concept. Let's take a look at our setup here. So we got a new project, we call it workspace, and we got two environments. It doesn't matter, by the way, if we have more than two, it's just a single step more, but to simplify the whole thing, two environments, we got 4 solutions, and we would like to have automatic updates of web resources and plugins. So things like JavaScript, HTML, and so on, but also we would like to build the assemblies, DLL files, and upload it automatically to the system, so we don't need to use any manual tools and update it. And I think this is a very great advantage because you know that the whole code went through the quality gates of DevOps. So you can build it, you can run some unit tests and stuff. And this is the interesting thing, so you don't have the risk that somebody just updated and overwrites some stuff from other developers. And of course, we would like to have automatic versioning. I will explain the details about that as well. When I say automatic versioning, I mean, okay, not just the solutions, but also the scripts and so on. So if you go to the production system, you will see you got the new versions. So you don't have to compare the code files, you will see it immediately. And of course, application users, so we prefer OAuth, of course. So we have application user ID and the client secret. I think this is the best approach here. And yeah, we would like to use Azure DevOps. So I'm going to show you how it can be done locally. So you do the configuration, you execute it locally, but then you can, with one click, you can just say, okay, I would like to execute the same thing in Azure DevOps. So our solution is a desktop application, but it's just for configuration purposes. So there's no dependency between the actual execution and the client, but I'm going to show you that later. Okay. So let's start with the first screen, and you can see it here. This is our application. So when you start it the first time, you don't have anything, of course. So there will be a prompt, and you need to enter some details about your workspace. So basically your project. And actually, this is a very simple thing. You just have the name here. Oh, let's switch to my pen here. So you got a name. In our case, this is called GoLet. So this is our example customer here. You need to define a root directory. So some location on your hard drive. If you already got a source control system, so you can just select the existing path or you can create a new one. And we basically just need one directory. So in this case, it's called build, and you can see it here. The directory will be created within your source control or your selected directory. Okay, so this is the first step, yeah, quite easy. So the next thing is we need to set up the environments. And if you have a new created workspace, there will be automatically a prompt where I need to enter the connection details. So in this case, okay, the name, I think this is PC, server, and the deployment type. Of course, we do support a lot of different deployments, But a very interesting feature here is, just selected it here, we got a functionality, it's called create new application user. And that basically means, of course, what it says, it will create the application user in the system. But the interesting thing is, usually when you create a new application user, the first thing is you need to go to the Azure portal and you will register a new app. And then you have to define the permissions to access the APIs and so on. And then you need to go to Dynamics, create a new user at the application ID. And maybe in most cases, if it's an deployment user, you need to set the permissions. So you need to assign the security roles as well. So a few steps. And what we do is we do it for you in the background. So basically you have the button, you say, okay, I would like to create a new application user. I don't care about the background activities. So if you click it, you need to sign in with the normal user because we need one user to create the application user. And after that, we are done. So in the background, we will see that on the next slide. Now we have a new user, and also we got the client sequence on the clipboard. So you should save it, store it in some safe place, yeah, because you cannot retrieve it anymore. But I think this is a well-known fact. Okay. Next thing is, and this is the interesting thing. So basically, I would like to show you here what happens in the background. So of course, we can try to connect. This is actually not required, but it's a recommended way to test the connection. And those things, we don't need to do that manually, because when we create or click the button, it will automatically create a new user and app register and so on. And also it will assign the system administrator role. And you can see it here, we got a new user. So this is a very fast way to set up the environment here. And of course, we can reuse the same user for multiple environments, but at least for production, we should create a new one. But I think the steps here are very easy. Okay. And yeah, so I forgot that. We got our app in Azure. So if you go to the Azure portal, you will see it, and you don't need to assign any API permissions. Okay. Then let's start with the first feature here, export solutions. And this is a very basic thing here, yeah. So of course we need to cover the basic thing, and what we do is with export solution, we try to make it as simple as possible to implement different strategies. So if you have multiple solutions, you have one single solution. In most cases, it's just managed, but you also can export both unmanaged and managed, and you also can extract the whole thing into your source control system so you can see the history and stuff. So, but this is not the focus for here. I would like to show you the basics, and then we can go to the more advanced steps later. Okay, so before we can start, let's take a look at the left navigation bar here. So what we got here is, of course, we got our environments, and we got two things. We call it source definition and deployment definition. And this is actually very simple. Source definition is how the package will be created, so the components and so on. And the deployment definition is basically how can we import the package or execute the package. So for example, in the source definition, we can define export the solutions, app sources, export some configuration data. And for the deployment definition, we define the import behavior and so on, and what we would like to do in case of any errors and things like that. So we got two parts here. And one more thing, we got our build providers. As you can see, it's already predefined. So if you create a new workspace, you will get the same thing. Yeah? And in this case, it's a local build provider. I will add the DevOps build provider later, but we will see that as well. So in this case, we have a predefined step, export solution. So I think it's already, yeah, okay. It wasn't necessary here. Okay, so what we got here is, this is pretty cool. I think the wording is very straightforward. We can select the environment where we would like to export the solutions. We can export it managed and unmanaged, but also we can update the version. This is an important part because the versioning system actually works like a pattern. So you should define a pattern, but we'll see that on the slides later again. You can define a pattern to generate the version and apply the same version to all components, solutions, web resources, assemblies, and so on. And of course, we can use a wildcard export pattern. So what we do here in our case, we got GoLet, which is again our sample customer, and we can export all of those solutions. So we don't need to define or modify any deployment configurations when we got the new solutions. And yeah, there's some advanced features as well, like the settings and advanced things like timeouts and so on, because sometimes we have very a big solution, so we need to modify the timeout values. Okay, so this was the first step here. And I'm gonna add some additional steps. So you can see it here when I click the add button, I will get a new dialog where I can select different steps. In this case, I was searching for update components. So let's add a new update step. Okay, and as you can see it here, we got some more. So I added add assembly version and also apply 𝗹𝗶𝗀𝗀 version. Those are very simple, so I'm not going to show that. But let's focus on update components. Update components means I would like to update my assemblies and my web resources, JavaScript and so on, from the source control system directly to Dynamics. So in this case, I would like to upload it to a dev environment. So I'm going to build the assemblies and then I'm uploading it. So this can be a very difficult challenge, but basically here it's quite easy. Yeah? So this is optional. You can define a web resource package, but also, let me do it like this, I think that's easier. Oops. Yep, okay. So also you can say, okay, I would like to upload all web resources to define a package. Output directory is in this case release. Sometimes people try to merge assemblies and things like that, and the path is different, but usually release can be used as default. And also for new web resources, I can define or select here the web resources solution and some other things, yeah, like custom prefix and so on. Yeah, this is not very important, but at the end of the day, you just define a few values and all of your resources will be uploaded. So you don't need to use any developer tools. Of course you can, it's not a problem. But if you check in the code, you can be sure that it will be uploaded and updated in the systems. And another thing is export data. I'm going to show that as well. So let me clean that first. So, okay. Now we got export CM data, and I know there are different tools and different scripts and so on. But again, our focus is to provide all of those features out of the box. And this is why I would like to show that as well. Where again, the environment, and I can select from different entities. And a very interesting thing is this is more or less a 3-level process. So first you can select the entity and can define a filter. So basically a fetch XML where you can set, okay, I would like to export just a subset of the data. And then you can define the input behavior, like create or update. In some cases, you just want to create them and don't care about the updates. And then you can say, okay, I would like to define the input behavior on an attribute level. So for example, we got static. That means it's more or less a one-to-one copy, so no adjustments. And interesting thing is also ignore, in this case for owner ID. So usually you have different IDs on different systems, so you don't want to copy their own ID because it will fail anyway. Okay, and in hierarchy, that's an interesting thing. So for example, if you've got product catalogs and business units and so on, you usually have one root and one single node actually, and then you have the child nodes. So you need to handle the order during the input process. And of course, we will do that for you in the background. And you can do the same thing, by the way, with multiple roots. There's another option, it's called hierarchy or multiple roots or something like that. And this can be used for things like products and so on, when you have multiple root nodes. And interesting thing is also environment specific. I'm going to show that on the next slide. And auto resolve. And I think this is a very common requirement. Usually you try to align the IDs, so you have the same IDs on each system, but sometimes that's possible. So for example, for currencies, you do have different IDs. You cannot change that because those IDs are predefined. And they're going to change those facts from time to time, but you will see that sometimes you have to handle that as well. So what we do with auto-resolve is we will retrieve the target system ID based on the primary attribute. So for example, if you got US dollars, it will look for an entity called US dollars and get the ID. So this is a very nice feature. Okay. Import. And this is the last step. When you take a look at the navigation here, now we are at the deployment definitions. So basically we just completed the source definition and now we can define the deployment definition. So we need to select CI managed. And by the way, those things are already predefined. So if you create a new workspace, you will get those things automatically. Yeah. So In this case, the rest is not interesting for us. We have our import solution step. So what we do here is, I think it's already, yep. So we can select from a list and also define the order. So we can basically move around the solutions here and apply some advanced features, yeah, for power automate and staging and so on, but also publishing. So this is a very basic thing, yeah. But the interesting thing is if it fails, or if you got some timers and stuff, yeah, we will automatically do a retry, yeah, based on some criteria. But yeah, so we try to automatically catch a lot of very common errors here. Okay, and the second thing is import data. So this is also a very simple step. So if you remember the previous slide, there was a slide regarding the export of data, and explained it to you, okay, you can define the import behavior of attributes and so on. And when you do the import, you don't have to define a lot of settings. You just say, okay, import environment is in this case, and you can force the update. So if the entity behavior is set to create only, you can still force it if it's required. And a very interesting fact is also data check, so I do not recommend to disable it. But what we do is we try to identify if the change is really necessary. So if the data is still the same, it's not necessary to update the entity. So we will skip the entity. This is why the performance is much better than if you just do a one-to-one copy. This is just one of the features in the background here. Okay. And step number 6. So when you execute the deployment, as I said, you can execute it locally, but also in DevOps. And of course, this is the recommended approach, because if you do it locally, nobody else will see it. Yeah? So if you go to DevOps, every team member can see it. Yeah? So the basic approach or the basic recommendation is do your main deployments via DevOps. And if you got some hotfixes or just roll out to other development instances, you can do it locally, but it really depends on your environment. But the official deployment should always be via DevOps or some other build providers. And so what we need to do is we need to add a new build provider. And the settings are very straightforward. We just need the URL. We need to select, is it Git or is it some other source control system? And then we can select the project, and that's basically it. There are some advanced features like, okay, different or custom repository and so on. So if the name is different, but in this case, we can skip that. And that's basically it. So, and what we can do now is we can select the deployment definition. So of course we can execute the source definition alone, but in this case we would like to create a new package and automatically deploy the package. So when I execute the deployment package, it will automatically start with the source definition and then continue with the deployment definition. So it will run both in just run. Okay, and what I can do now is I select it, I go to execute definition, select my build provider, in this case Azure DevOps, and that's it. So what happens next is, of course, I need a pipeline. So if I don't have anything, if I have just a greenfield project in DevOps, I need to create a pipeline first. And in this case, I already got one, but let's say we don't have it, then I need to create one. So I can click on the button, create pipeline, and this application will automatically connect to DevOps, create a new pipeline, set different settings and so on. So you don't have to do it manually, just click on create pipeline. It takes less than 2 minutes, yeah, so less than 1 minute actually. And yeah, and then of course you can select it and execute it. So this will queue a new build in DevOps, a new pipeline, and it will automatically export the solutions. For that, it will update the components and stuff and versioning, and everything else will be done automatically in the pipeline. So you don't need to do anything else. And of course, then you can create a new release and stuff. So this is the very basic case here. And again, I think this can be done in 2 minutes if you're fast, yeah, but the basic steps are usually always the same. So there's no difference if you have a big project or a smaller project. Anyway, you can do that very fast. Okay, then a few business cases. Versioning. That's an interesting one. I always say, hey guys, if you do it manually, don't do it, because usually you will miss someday and you cannot be sure that the versioning is 100% correct. So you really should define some pattern based on some automatic way that the version will be generated. So in this case, this is just an example. Yeah, In DevOps, I got my major version, so I got some variables here, and the year, so basically 21 in this case, and the day of the year and stuff. So of course you can modify it, you just need to make sure that it will be an increasing number. Yeah. So what we do is, and this is actually the result of the 2-minute 𝗖𝗍 implementation, I will get something like this. So when I execute the deployment, it will update all of my solutions here, and also the web resources. So in this case, I got an assembly, so basically a plugin, and you can see the version here. Yeah. And another thing is web resources. In this case, contact.js, it's an empty file because there's no code, but I think you can insert the code here. But you will see, if you go to the system, you will see the version here. And I think this is a very great thing, yeah. If you go to the production system, and you will immediately see the version, yeah. And actually, you don't have to write any code, yeah. You see it in the very first beginning. So that's a very cool thing, yeah. And I think I already mentioned that update of web resources. So it's a very good thing if you check in your code. So basically, you commit it to a repository, and you can be sure that the code is safe. Yeah, it went through some quality gates and things like that, so you don't have to worry about any unexpected changes. And this is why we did that. So this is the same screenshot again, so you can select the different settings. And in this case, I have a very simple project. So I have plugins, web resources, and things like that. So nothing special. And I got my plugin here. So this is a very simple thing. But yeah, it doesn't matter if you have a complex structure or whatever. Yeah, it will basically go through the different folders and find the right resources. And when I execute it, I will get something like this. So of course there's some assemblies and so on, but this one is the important thing. So we got run DLL here, so it will be updated, yeah. And in this case, we got 3 plugins and so on. So there's a lot of things in the background, yeah, regarding the plugin steps and images and so on. So we do a lot of advanced quality checks in the background and provide you some useful error information if it fails for some reason. Yeah, and the same thing is basically for web resources. You can see it here. We got our contact.js, so it will be updated. And of course, it works for hundreds of web resources if you have a lot of custom development here. And hotfixes, I think this is also a very common requirement. Usually when you have your pipelines in place and you have your scripts and so on, that people say, okay, we can execute the full deployment, but if you would like to execute just part of it, we need to modify it, or at the end of the day, in most cases, they just do it manually. And yeah, this is another interesting thing. Yeah, we have different ways to do that. So in this case, I got the hotfix deployment definition here, but they do not have any source definition. So if you don't need to export any data, so if you just need to do some data maintenance, basically set some steps and set some values and so on, you can do that immediately. So you define the maintenance step, say, okay, deployment definition, create a new release package, and you will get a zip file. This zip file can be executed by a third-party person, or you can execute it directly within the application. There are different ways to do that, but the interesting thing is if you have to hand over it to a third-party person, for example, for the customer, because you don't have access to the production system, you can just create a new release package and other people are able to execute it, so they don't need any special tools for that. You will get the zip file and you can extract it, and you will get something like the start CMD and so on. You just need to click on start and it will start to execute the deployment. And also, of course, you got the log file. So you don't need to ask the people, okay, what happened? Okay, just explain me the steps. You just say, okay, send me the log file, and that's it. Yeah, so you will see it on the console window, but also saved into a file. Yeah, a very common technical challenge is to switch from option sets or choices to entity reference. And what we do is, if you think about the previous step, the hotfix package, sometimes we have to do things like that. So what we do is we try to convert automatically different types. So for example, if you say, okay, I got a new hotfix package, then you can define of course, you need to define the environment first, but then you can add the step. So in this case, data maintenance. You say, okay, this is against the dev environment, don't need impersonation. This is not necessary in this case. Operation is update, define a filter, select entity and so on. And then you can, it's already pre-selected here. In this case, it's called golet_lookup. But of course, you can select as uncheck the box here. Then you will see all environments. In this case, you can set a static value or set a dynamic value expression. So in this case, we would like to convert this one to an entity reference. And how it works is actually, of course, you will take the display name and look for the associated entity reference. Because as you know, behind the scenes, it's actually a number, and it's quite hard to retrieve the metadata and so on. So it's a very cool thing to do it this way. And yeah, you can see it here. I just go for the new attribute and say OK, and I will get something like this, and you can see it here. Okay, it's not highlighted. It will convert from the attribute to the new entity reference. And of course, this works with every type of entity or attribute. Okay, first plugin execution. So from time to time, you need to disable plugin steps during the import process. And what people usually do, they go to the system, plugin registration tool, and disable it. Yeah. And I say we try to avoid manual steps. So this is why we can do it automatically. In this case, we have two plugins with actually two steps here, and we would like to disable it. So that's a very easy task. We just search for plugins SDK, for steps in this case, and we can define. And by the way, of course, we have IntelliSense here, so you don't have to type it manually. So we can select from the list, and you will see, okay, which plugins are included. So quite easy, just select the plugins or define the wildcard, and also enable them again. So we will see that disable plugins. This is the result. I think this is very straightforward, but it's a nice feature and can be very helpful for data migrations and imports. Source control. This is a very interesting fact. Yeah, usually when you join a new team, you need to, of course, there's an onboarding process and so on, but then you need to know how you can update components in the system. So what we do is we're integrated into the source control. That means if you have a new workspace, and if you remember the first slide, we had actually this one. So we had to define a new workspace and so on. But if you're a new team member, you just start the application, and you can click on Get. So actually this one. And then you need to define the connection details for your development server, in this case Azure DevOps. Select the purchase and select a new path, so you can map the local path to the repository in your source control server. And you just click on Map, and you will get the workspace, and you can start to work on it. So you don't have to recreate the whole thing. You don't need to do anything else. You just say Get, and you will get the full thing. And of course, when you do some changes, if you're a new team member, you adjust some things and say, okay, we need to export more data, whatever. You modify the data and just say check in, and it will automatically commit the changes to a source control, so everybody else will get it. And of course, the same thing works for any updates, so you can retrieve the latest version from the cross-control system automatically. So, and yeah, this is very straightforward here. Okay, one of the last points is I told you we can configure data, we can export data. Yeah, so in most cases this is just some configuration data, but sometimes you need to set environment-specific values. And that actually means, okay, you need to define a different value for each environment. So for example, a connection URL to a different system, and those values are usually different for each system. So in this case, I can select environment specific, and then I can define for each environment a separate value. So in this case, it's empty, but of course I can use a static value. I just need to enter the value here, or I can also define a dynamic expression, so basically retrieve the value based on the other data, so you can browse through the metadata of the system. And also, of course, it works for entity references, option sets, and so on, so any type of attribute. And yeah, the last thing here is missing values. So in this case, it's empty. So this is a very common use case if you have a developer and develop some new things, new features, and they say, okay, I got a new configuration on my development system, but he forgets to say, okay, we need to define something in production as well. So you will see that immediately. So if you have environment-specific values without an actual value, you will get an error message here. Okay, and let's come to one of the last things here regarding release notes. I think this is another interesting thing. Usually people are using Azure DevOps as a work tracking system. So you have your bugs, you have user stories and stuff, but also components. And sometimes you would like to know, okay, after each deployment or after each release, I would like to know the difference between this version and the previous version. And what we do here is we retrieve information from different sources, like your current sprint and so on, so which work items are actually part of the deployment, but also components from Dynamics. So basically compare the different components and you will see the names and IDs and so on. So when somebody deletes a new component or whatever, you can say, okay, that happens on that day. So you can see that as well. Let's take a look at an example here. So this is how it looks like. And of course, you can set the level of details. In this case, this is just a basic version here. Okay. Another interesting thing about compliance is, of course, you can block users. I would like to go through that very fast, because I think we're running out of time and it's too much for today's session. But of course, we do support blocking users. That can be helpful if you have a lot of users. You can block them based on the business unit, so you can make sure that nothing happens during the deployment. Of course, there are some options for rollbacks and things like that. I think there's enough information about it in the documentation. Okay, now the end of the session, but I would like to show you a quick demo. So hopefully we will not run into any timeouts. So let me quick do that. So, this is basically our application. So it's actually the same project, and I think in this case it's called GoLet. You can see it here. So if you start the application and create a new workspace, you will get something like this. In this case, I will got my hotfix and so on. So basically what I've done on the previous slides. And now I would like to start it. So I don't need to adjust anything yet. It's already predefined here. So let's just go to execute definition. And in this case, I would like to start with the local version. So, and as you can see, it will start with some initial things, and now it's building the solution, so code and stuff. And now we need to, it connects to the system, repositories will be uploaded. So basically the same thing. And of course, we do not wait for the end of the session, end of the deployment here, because it will take a few moments. So in the meantime, I will take a look at the questions. Let's just wait a few minutes. But in between, please think about the questions so you can start to post your questions, of course. And during that time, I would like to explain a few things here. So as you can see, of course, most of the stuff is very fast. So apply the versioning, it's less than a second. So building is also very fast, but of course, it depends on your project. So also, okay, we got the web resources here. So we got the package, we got the connections and so on. And actually, we can skip all of them. This is interesting. And yeah, so it will be uploaded. You can see it here. So it works as expected. And yeah, now the managed export. And again, this is the local execution. Of course, you can do the same thing in DevOps. So you will see the same results. But in this case, I would like to stay here because it's easier right now. Okay. So while we are waiting, let's take a look at the questions here. A few moments. Okay, we do have a few questions. Give me a moment to think about it. Okay, yeah. Of course, the session will be recorded, so we will publish the recordings. I'm not sure if it's possible today, but I think within the next days. And Okay, yeah, we can custom. We can write scripts for all of those features. Okay, where's the need for such a product? Yeah, well, and again, I said at the beginning, of course, you can write your own scripts, but you have to invest a lot of time to do the maintenance stuff. If you're happy with the scripts, it's totally fine. Yeah. What we try to provide is we provide out-of-the-box solutions. You don't need to maintain the script. So if you have your own team for that, fair enough. Yeah, then you don't need our solution. But don't forget, always when you have the scripts, and you have a new feature, you have always be prepared for new requirements. Yeah, and I think this is one of the most complicated issues because you do not know, okay, does it work the next time or not? But yeah, this is a different story. Can the tool handle hotfixes? Yeah, I think I already explained that. But again, yeah, if you do hotfixes and you just want to export parts of the solutions, not the full deployment, you have to think about the dependencies. So what we can do is we provide a technical tool to do a lot of things easier. But of course, we do not understand how the components works in reality. So we cannot analyze the business processes and so on. So if you define a hotfix package, we provide the technical tool set for that. But you need to know, okay, what you would like to achieve with the deployment. I hope that answers the question, yeah. Okay. Okay, I think we are already over the time here, or at least almost, okay. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out. Yeah, we will close the sessions in a few moments because this will take some time to execute the deployment, but you can see it works actually. So what happens next is it will export the solutions and then it will do some quality checks and stuff like that. And then we'll start to import solutions, apply versioning and checks for any conflicts and so on. But I think this will take too much time. But we have already published a few videos where you can see the results and the end of the successful deployment. Yeah, more questions. Okay, is it possible to deploy a solution with different solution name for each deployment using 𝗖𝗂? Yes, of course. So basically you can define multiple export steps where you have different names. So if you do not have a common publisher prefix, you need to add multiple steps, but it's absolutely possible. So you also can define the import order then. So this is no big deal. Okay, I think the rest of the question will be answered within the next days. Yeah, so I cannot go through all of the questions because we are running out of time here. But thank you for listening and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And of course, you can get a trial if you're interested. If you have any other deployment issues, feel free to reach out and have a nice day. Goodbye.